Hey, welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Deckerhoof. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts, man, I'm so grateful you're here. Either you are a subscriber, one of the many subscribers to this podcast, or somebody got great value out of this episode and they shared it with you. And for that, I am tremendously grateful. One, because I get to spend time with you. Two, that you get to hear from my friend Thomas Williams. Today's guest on this podcast is Thomas Williams. Thomas is a speaker. He's an author. He and I have done an event together. We did an event a couple years ago. We're friends. And I'm so excited to have this conversation. Not only do we two friends that get to catch up, but as well, we get to talk about life's adversity, challenges as leaders, as parents, this melting pot, the seas of change that we're in right now. But more importantly, a topic that I'm going to discuss in this podcast. And then I'm going to follow up in our next episode where I discuss mentors. I'm going to share in the next episode how I chose one of my mentors, a mentor I discuss in this episode. And as well in this conversation with Thomas, Thomas shares a lot and he talks about mentors in his book, Dig. The byline title of that is Discover Your Depth, Determination, and Destiny Through Adversity. Not only do we talk about digging and digging deep and learning to go, but also what it means that, adversity, if we force ourselves into adversity, it actually builds our resilience. Thomas shares one of these points in this conversation. I'll get into so much more afterwards, but that convenience kills discipline. I'm excited you're here. If you're watching on YouTube, as we continually grow in subscribers there, you also get a piece of each one of these episodes that I release through the week as I leave just a quick 2 or 3 minute live video, shows on YouTube, on social channels as well. But if you're a subscriber on YouTube, you will get that notification, and love to have you join me throughout the week. Again, thanks for being here, and I'll catch you at the end of this conversation. Thomas, good to see you, man.
My man Tyler, what's up, brother? How you doing?
I am so excited. I'm so excited to have this conversation. It's been a minute since we've caught up, so it's been an opportunity. We're now 20 minutes into this conversation of just catching up, talking about life, and you just shared a piece with me that I knew, from previous conversations that you've taken adventures in life. You at one point in life when you got done playing professionally, you went to Australia. You just told me about, Amsterdam, and then we were talking about the latest trip you had, Peru. Yeah. And one thing that I want to ask as we jump off into this conversation, we're going to talk about your book, Dig, but tell me about the correlation between the yearning for that adventure and digging deeper in what you learn in those adventures and how that really does apply to this book.
Yeah, man. It's funny that first and foremost, people have been asking me about the book, how much of this book is your story? And I think that it has nothing to do with me because it's a fable, but I think it has everything to do with the past, as well as some of the places that you want to go and some of the things that you want to accomplish. And so for me, I had to dig deep in Peru. And so I'm about a week back home, kind of, back at elevation. And it's wild because you think you come to the Mile High. My family and I live in Denver. You come to Mile High and you're up there. And then finally you get to a place like Peru and you look down at your watch and it looks like 11,500 feet. And you're like, excuse me? what do you mean? I'm double of what I just came from. And one of the things about the trip to Peru, I thought it was going to be relaxation, but it was actually about me stepping into several different comfort zones. Obviously, I went to the place where everybody takes Instagram pictures and went to Machu Picchu. And then somebody points to me and says, hey, see that mountain over there? That's the one people actually come here to climb. And I'm thinking, all right, fine, I'll go do it. And so I start out on this journey of climbing, and I was freaked out, Tyler. In several parts along the way, I actually tried to go back. And I tried to go back down to the bottom. But something inside of me I kept seeing my family's face of, what if my family was here and I told them, hey guys, we're done climbing, we're done going. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, but is this the end? And I turn to them and I go, no, it's not the end, but it's the end for me. And what I learned in those moments, Tyler, was first and foremost, I was praying to God as I was climbing up. It's called Huayna Picchu, which means young mountain. Machu Picchu is old mountain. Huayna Picchu means young mountain. And so I'm climbing Young Mountain, And as I'm going up there, I just keep praying to God. And God says, each time you come into an adverse situation, you think that it's you and you, but it's actually you and us. And I'm literally climbing, and God goes, you call on me because I'm the strongest one you know. I call on the Trinity because they're the strongest that I know. So when he was telling me, it's wild because he was telling me that every adverse situation I'm in is that it's me and them. That's why he said us. And so he brings the Father, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus into all of the situations. And that's what was able to get me to the top of the mountain. And I think in most situations, I have felt like it's just me and me, whether it's running the household, whether it's family with Taylor and parenting with our kids. I always feel like it's me, and that's a heck of a lot of pressure when you feel like it's just you. But anytime I'm able to channel into the Holy Spirit, that he gives me strength that I didn't even know that I had. And a couple of days after hiking Pichu, I'm on the side of another mountain getting ready to zip line. And so you're about 1,500 steps. Just almost picture a ladder climbing hand over hand, foot over foot. And you're doing this for 90 minutes. And a couple times I tried to quit. And making it to the top of this mountain and zip lining down, where I thought zip lining would be the challenge. I couldn't wait to jump on that zip line and get down off of that dang mountain. The challenge was climbing up. And what it's shown me is that I can't even imagine how much strength that I have inside of me. And so many times, a lot of us think that we've hit our limits, we've hit our peak, we're tapped out. And I'm here to tell you that you haven't even hit your limit. You couldn't even imagine your capacity of the strength that you have. See, our minds think that we have one level of strength or capacity. But actually, internally, we have so much more than that. But most of the time, we never reach it because we stop at the place where we get uncomfortable as opposed to the place where we're actually uncomfortable.
How much do you find that it's important for you to go on those journeys to stretch?
So important. So important because having the family, like there's a lot of routine, right? Bedtime, bath time.
Yep.
We go and jump in the car to schools and all of these things.
Yep.
And so we become kind of what our life's perspective is. So anytime I can get out of my comfort zone and I can take off for 3, 5, 7 days and go to a place where English isn't the first language, which now I'm automatically in an uncomfortable predicament. Living conditions aren't just walk out and go to a Starbucks and, go to Target if you need, any items. It's so many things that are new. And so for me, this allows me to open up my perspective and saying my situation, even though I might feel that it's mundane, it might feel regular, it's actually a luxury to walk in my shoes. It's a luxury to have the normalcy. But more than that, it encourages me to be creative in the mundane, in the routine, in the structure. And when you get uncomfortable, whether it's going to the restroom in public and having to pay $1 and seeing their circumstances, or they point you to your room and it's smaller than a twin size bed. And I'm like, my daughter has a bigger bed than this. And it's like, be very grateful, be gracious, have an appreciation. And then when you step outside, it's actually because you have less, you can be happier as opposed to more. This was the first time that I've taken only a carry-on. I had a carry-on backpack and a carry-on stroller. And, I had a pair of pants, shorts. I mean, I had so little. But even though I was so excited because there was so much to explore on the outside and then learning about all of the people inside of their culture and history of what they've experienced.
The title of your book, Dig, is Discover Your Depth, Determination, and Destiny Through Diversity. I think there's a point here, though, that I wrote down. Forced adversity drives resilience training. You talked about only taking a few items. In your book, you tell the story of a young man who's senior in high school, whose family moved locations. He moved schools. His father lost his job, and now they needed to kind of pick up what life was. It was this fable of adversity, and yet you tell the tale of resilience. But there's one piece that I think you mentioned earlier from a faith perspective, and we share that, and that guidance of mentorship. But in the book, you talk so much, use so many examples of mentors. In how much do you find either yourself, now that you've gone through that, can be better equipped to mentor others, or how in those moments of adversity you've gone through and that resilience training, have you found that, man, mentors were the ones that actually helped guide me through that?
Yeah, so good, right? When you talk about anybody getting outside of their normalcy in they're actually in adversity, that's the greatest place to grow. And what I mean by that is that convenience kills discipline. Anything that we've ever been convened to is that it actually killed our discipline. And so inside of the story, like you had mentioned, the student, he transitions schools. He loses what he thought was the best thing ever for him going into maybe one of the most important years, his senior year in high school.
Yeah.
Got to find new friends. You got to find a new routine, a new grocery store. Dad, your almighty superhero loses his job. And so now he might be experiencing some type of anxiety, depression. Mentorship is one of the most critical things that we could ever find, because inside of mentorship, there's two things. There's humility. I got to come to you because I need some advice. I need some direction. I need some clarity. But then there's also another side of admiration. So the old person that sits at the top of the hill has admiration for the young mentee, because the saying is, youth is wasted on the young, is so evident. I wish I had your energy to complete what I know. I wish I had your energy to complete the knowledge that I have. And so when we're in a mentor-mentee relationship, we're literally sitting on two opposite ends of the spectrum from one another. You are what I used to be, young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, full of energy, piss and vinegar, as they say. And you, on the other side, is you're actually showing me of who I will become. Who can I expect to become? What's my energy? What's the person that I'm going to look like in the mirror? What are they going to look like? And so one of the greatest things, if we can ask people for advice and for help to give us the knowledge and wisdom so that we can have the same amount of energy to complete the information and the wisdom and the knowledge that we have, that's where we have a chance. I remember hearing a couple of years ago the quote of, learn from the mistakes of others because you can't make them all yourself. And what that really speaks to me is learn from the mistakes of others so you don't have to take the 5 years, 10 years, or 3 hours that it took to make the mistake, because it's great to get to the destination as fast as possible. Yeah, you want to enjoy the journey, which they say in the traffic stops, but what if we can get there a little bit faster? What if we can get there a little bit sooner so that we can actually enjoy it?
Yeah. I think that the thought that comes to my mind is the only shortcut in life is what you just said, is learning from the mistakes of others. That, as you said, I can take 5 years to learn this painfully myself, or I can just ask the advice, seek the mentorship. You did that, 15 minutes ago when we're talking about looking at buying property, doing those things, and it's that humility, and it's also understanding, who do I ask who I know shares the same values, shares the same interests, or shares the same desires ultimately, that then there's an accordance in their advice. Yeah. Because I think that's important too, right?
So good. It's, okay, Thomas, and so in the book, Dig, there's 4 points, 4 principles. And first and foremost, it's something's either pushing you or something's preventing you. And most of the time when we're trying to get to a destination, we think that things that are preventing us, well, I can't do it for this. But actually, when you flip those on its head, those are the things that are pushing you. I remember when I was in 6th grade, my mom came home from a parent-teacher conference, and she said, your 6th grade teacher told me that by the time you're 16 years old, you'll be shot, stabbed, killed, and the leader of a gang. And Tyler, in that moment, that could have been everything to prevent me, because my 6th grade teacher had already put a limitation on me. But in that moment, I used it as my driving force. The second principle and point in the book is, if you can't find the example, find the proof. If you don't have the example that this can get done, that this can be done in my household, in my neighborhood, in my community, you have to find the proof. Before 1954, the whole entire world thought it was physically impossible to break the 4-minute mile. But Roger Bannister came along in the spring of 1954 and broke the 4-minute mile. And then in that same year, right around 50 people also broke the 4-minute mile. So now in the span of that year, did people just get faster and stronger? And like, did they just become better? No, they found the proof that it could be done. And so many times when we're looking for a mentor, we just think that somebody who's, speaking towards that thing or speaking on that subject, that they're an expert matter, but they're actually not. I've been lucky to have the mentors, and I've found this in all of the mentors that I have. They are or have been to the place that I want to go. Ed Santapadre, high school coach. He had trained other athletes who had gone to college. So I just have to ask him, okay, coach, what do I need to do? And that's what I asked him all the time. Ken Norton Jr. in college. He had played in the NFL. He even though I didn't have the example growing up of what a professional athlete looked like, I had the proof every single day. Coach, how many times did you do push-ups? How many wind sprints did you do? And now outside of sports, I'm John Gordon, who I can text, I can call. John, how should I start this speech? Hey, John, when I write this book, what characters do I need to include? Everybody who I just mentioned, they've done or are doing exactly what I want to do. So most of the time, we just think that somebody who speaks about a topic, speaks about a theme, that they know what they're doing. You got to pull back the cover. Ask them, what was it like when they did that? So that's the thing about examples and proof. Thirdly, what we have to find is we're not looking for that moment of what we're doing that brings our heartbeat alive, that brings us excited, that just makes us so pumped up. We actually need to look for the quitting moments. In every single moment or every single thing that we're pursuing and that we're going after, there's a quitting moment. And in those quitting moments, we have to get so excited, so pumped up about it. And I'll give you the example, Tyler, what I'm talking about. Going into my senior year, I went to my coach's office and I said, Coach, what's the reason to fight for this dream of playing professional sports if you don't even feel like you can win? And I was like, just allow me to quit and enjoy my senior year. He looked at me, he said, Thomas, if you give everything you have to the NFL and they still don't want you, maybe they don't deserve you. And in that moment, Tyler, I was going to quit. I was already on my way to turn in my jersey to hand in like my towel and everything like that. Like I'm done.
Seems like I read a piece about this in the book.
There you go, right? And so just on the other side of that, Coach Norton gave me the privilege and the permission to know that I'm on the same level as my dream, as what I'm going after. And so he gave me the opportunity to level up. But if I would have quit, I would have never come to that realization. And now what I teach to instill in my children, as well as the audience and the groups that we talk to, is that get excited in those quitting moments. Now, I'm not saying that every single quitting moment is going to produce the moment that now all of a sudden you're going to reach that goal. But what's going to happen is there's miracles in the quitting moment. And fourth and most importantly is you got to run towards the roar. We got to run towards the roar in life. And running towards the roar comes from an old African proverb, is that when you take the hyenas or just use, hyenas in this situation, they're all at this water hole and they're bathing and they're drinking and they're communing together. And so what happens is that the lions take the oldest, loudest roaring lion, unathletic, can't run, can't do anything other than roar. And they put him on one side of the hyenas. And then on the completely different opposite side, there's the fast, ferocious, athletic, hungry lioness that are waiting. So that loud, roaring lion roars as loud as it possibly can. And what happens is it freaks out the hyenas that are in the water hole. And they run in the completely opposite direction, not knowing that that's exactly where the lions wanted you to run. But if you'd have just ran towards the roar, ran towards that fear, then you would have actually, in essence, kept yourself alive. And so that's the thing that we have to do, is we have to run towards that roar inside of doing the things that we ultimately want to accomplish.
When you talked about seek the quitting moments, it reminds me of a lesson that I've learned from one of my mentors, John Maxwell, is don't quit something, go to something.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of as you describe that element of having that mentor that encouraged you and spoke belief into you. I mean, when you talked about Ken, but there's also that idea that when we come to those moments, are we just going to quit to like, oh, it's easier? It's like when you talked about climbing the mountain, I'll just quit. But no, you're reminded. And as you told the story, and I think about the example myself as a father, it's like, if I quit now, what example does that show? That, oh, it got hard. It got hard, so I'm just going to bow out. Yeah. Instead of, and I think there's moments where, yeah, the best decision is I got to cut and run. But go to something. Run to the roar, meaning if there's a line in the sand and there's ultimately a time as, seek that mentorship, but also go and run into it. Don't quit because you're, I'm going to choose the easier path or the less intimidating path, or I don't want to fight through just to fight and be no farther along in 6 months. Understand, if I do, where am I going to run to? Where am I going?
Yeah.
And that's what, as you shared that the elements that I've been told and I've learned to myself, it's a hard thing to I really weigh. As a father, that's something that trying to guide my 15-year-old son through right now. Yeah. He's in the midst of doing exactly that. And we had family discussion last night, and it's been a trying 6-7 weeks of being in a difficult situation that isn't right, to now kind of trying to make a decision. And part of it is like, you got to fulfill your commitment, but also I'm encouraged by this and saying, okay, reminded again, there's one thing to quit, and there's another, what are you running to?
Yeah.
What are you going to, and what's that going to look like? What are you going to give to this next adventure? Because where you've been, you either haven't been, or you haven't felt that passion and desire, that love, that commitment to go to it.
Yeah, it's so good. Tyler, one of the things that I'm really heavily influencing people on is the theme of responsibility over feelings. So many times our feelings lead our actions, but feelings are fleeting, right? When people ask right now, like, are you happy? That's a 50-50 question, right? I think the answer is I'm fulfilled. And I think when we are led by responsibilities, right? And so when you talk about Maxwell, right, he talks about values a lot, right? We're led by values and things of that nature. And I think we have to understand, like, what are your responsibilities? The same thing with our daughter. Our daughter, is in swimming, and her feeling is, I don't want to go to swim class. I love swimming, but I don't want to go to swim class. And it's like, well, we signed up to do this many sessions. And so your responsibility is to complete that. Now, once that's over, it's not called quitting because you didn't want to sign back up or you didn't want to go into swimming for next season. But your responsibility is that I felt really good in the moment, and I'm going to sign up, and my responsibility is to keep my commitment. My responsibility is, as a father, to show up even when I don't want to. No, I don't feel like showing up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't feel like it, but my responsibility is, as an athlete, as a teammate, I don't feel like practicing today, but my responsibility as a teammate, as somebody who's contributing to the energy of this team, I need to keep going. And so that responsibility drives our feelings as opposed to our feelings driving our responsibility. We'll get those same type of things in those efforts. And when you talk to as a father, where does your confidence come from? My confidence as a father comes from, I'm not teaching you anything I'm not willing to go through myself. So in those moments where I'm hanging on the side of the cliff at 400 feet, I can't come home and tell my kids, yep, you got to do tough things. In life, sometimes you got to do some things that you don't necessarily want to do. If I would have climbed down, I'm going down the ladder on the side of the mountain and I quit, I don't have as much passion. I don't have as much fierce and ferocity when I'm telling my children those same things, because I'm not willing to do those same things. And that's why mentorship is so important, because the mentors are either in the position that the mentee wants to be, or they've been there. And so what's the easiest way to tell people or show people how to get somewhere? Is going there yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that comes back to the example or proof. And, one of the, after reading the book and thinking about it, and you share the story in there about Roger Bannister, as you did a few moments ago, and thinking about it, it's like, there's someone who is courageous enough to say, why not? He ran to the roar of, it can't be done. It's like, let me show you.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so many ways in life, the example, the things that you've gone through in life, the things that I've gone through, every single person has gone through some type of adversity in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And that gives each one of us the opportunity to be the example and be the proof.
That's
And
it.
it's choosing to say, here we, 69 years later, 70, such a long time since Roger Bannister accomplished that feat. And it has more relevance or as much relevance today as ever.
Yeah.
Because what are the things around us, whether it's in leadership or as you're talking to organizations about positivity and being the organizations that people really deserve to have, and saying, oh, it can be done. You can be a nice person and be a very accountable, efficient leader. You don't have to be that hard, that callous, that almost disconnected leader to get high performance. Quite honestly, you'll find that it doesn't last, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. And instead, be the proof to say, no, I'm going to be the kind, nice, encouraging, appreciative person. And our society is starting to really show that's where people perform the best.
Yeah. And then where do you, in your opinion or your experience, what examples have you had where people have actually been the nice leader, been the effective leader, been the positive leader, as opposed to, the opposite end of the spectrum of that?
It's much fewer. It is fewer. And it's fewer because it's almost as the exception instead of being the rule. Yeah. I mentioned earlier about my son. One of the difficulties he's going through is he's playing for a very difficult leader, a leader who is unwilling to meet players. He's told me quite honestly, I don't have the time to speak their love language. I don't have the time to encourage them. I don't have the time. That's not me, so I'm not going to do it. And my son is sitting here and he's evaluating the experience and what he's put into it. It's like, I don't want to play professionally here. There's another area I want to play professionally. And that environment is so much different. And so what we're weighing here is seeing, all right, not everything is of face value. You get into it and it's going to be challenging and tough. But then it's like if you have a mentor in your life who you identify, this is not the healthy way, meaning it's not the right way. Why do I need to keep submitting myself to that once I've realized, okay, there's a better path?
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge that, why am I so pursuant of this podcast and relationships with you? And you mentioned John Gordon, relationship by the him. And why? Because I've committed to wanting to be better, and or I realize that's the great miss in our society.
Yeah.
Is not only do we have corporations and organizations where leaders choose to be, pull away. I read a great book here the last couple of days, and it talked about how in a lot of organizations, the higher you climb, the more that you lose perspective about what people are going through. And so you become this separation and the anxiety and tension of I have to keep this role, to where your empathy actually dips. And it makes so much sense because now, if I don't hold everyone accountable, then everything will go to waste. It's like, but your job is to encourage, and through encouragement and invitation, that holds people accountable. Because if they're either going to fit in or fit out. And so, to this point, I think that's the great wrestle generationally that you and I I feel committed to say, I once was, but now I've been around so many other people that are better examples to say that's not the way.
Yeah, and I think there's also something really cool with what you're saying, and it reminds me of a secret sauce that I've heard and learned a long time ago, is that leaders need to be led. And so once a leader stops being led and they only think their job is to be a leader, then they lose exactly what you talked about, is that perspective with the ground or with the ground floor. They get up so high because you simultaneously, as you're leading and you're being led, you understand both sides. You understand what it's like to be led. So this is what these are what my people who are following me are experiencing, as well as this is what I'm supposed to do in being led. But anytime you cut that off, it's like somebody who's constantly feeding but not feeding themselves or being fed, then there's going to be a deficiency. And anytime there's a deficiency, then somebody's going to lose out and lack thereof.
As you're saying that, and I think, sports are, you played professional football, you played college football, you played with some of the most notable coaches the sport has seen. And I think back to an episode that we saw last fall. For people that are NFL fans, they probably saw this, where, Hamlin.
Yeah.
Yes. Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field, had a heart incident. And Sean McDermott, who was one of your coaches, was the coach there. And you saw him visibly, he was shaken. Not because he had a football game to play or win. And he didn't care about that, as you saw afterward and beyond. It was like, dude's a person, and that's what I worry about first. And if we take that same experience as that conversation we were just having, was that the reaction of, first I'm worried about, football, now, the optics, I need to be worried about the player. We never saw or heard that. He was absolutely first worried about the player. The game didn't matter. And yet, as that example, and I think about that, and I think about you having a relationship with Sean, and think about, that's what great leaders do.
Yeah.
They're not worried so much about the production and what's going to happen and, how do we meet our numbers and everything else. They're worried about, dude, Thomas.
How are my people?
Are you okay? That's my first priority, because if I worry about, are you fulfilled? Are you safe? Are you are you, know that you have a place here and that you're valued beyond anything that you can do. What I've learned is people will give beyond for those people.
Yeah.
They will give beyond their, they will climb to the top of that mountain and not give up. Like you did for your family as the example, people will do that for leaders that care more about them than anything else. And yet we've struggled in our society, almost this change of leadership, to really say that, that's the real way.
Why do you think we've struggled?
Well, I think it's things that we've talked about, things that we've presented about, together. It's this change of generations. We see this generation of baby boomers, this leadership style. Well, this is the way it's going to be, and just this is our expectation. And yet we have a different generation that's saying, it doesn't have to be like that. And yet we have this conflict, this mashing of seas, and not understanding that how we got to where we're at was not by being so dictatorial. It was actually by caring.
Yeah.
And yet when we had this generation of layoffs and not caring and I'm going to get mine, is what we brought about this leadership style that is like, it's all about the shareholders. It's all about chasing the profit. It's like, you go back 50 years, you read enough about businesses in the 50s and beyond. It was, hey, you're going to be here. We care about you as a person. We're doing this business for you. Now, there's some profit there. But it quickly got changed and morphed. And that's where I think the tide is so changing. And people like yourself and John have done such a tremendous job of saying, no, we can be positive about it. We can absolutely be encouraging through the process. That's the better way.
Yep. And I think, Tyler, as you mentioned, it reminds me of the first conversation I had with John Gordon in person. And he said, he said, so many times we focus on the fruit and we neglect the root, and that's when the tree dies. Yep. And, the root is people. I think one of the things we're trying to figure out right now is like, how far is technology going to take, AI? And we're thinking to ourselves that, technology is going to overrule people. And I don't have that answer. I don't know. That's way above anything I could ever think or fathom. I'm just the guy who knows how to turn on his cell phone and barely can text. But what I do know is that people will always be here, and understanding how you treat people will always be the common denominator. Always be the common denominator. And that's the legacy. And I'll sharing with you real quick, one of the legacy pieces of this phase of life, whether it's on the thing side or whether it's on the people side, and people meaning, what's the legacy that you leave? My mom taught me at a very young age. We were outside and we were doing yard work on a Saturday, and my mom wanted me to hang a pot and she was like, Thomas, come over here. Let me show you how to hang this pot. And I was like, Mom, I don't need to learn how to hang a pot. I'm going to make so much money. I'm going to pay somebody to do that. And she said, Thomas, let me tell you something. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care the status or fame that you endure and that you accomplish. She said, never forget that your reason and purpose here on earth is the way that you affect human beings. I say that happened in the mid-90s. A few months ago, I was on a flight headed from California to the East Coast. I can't tell you where I was, but there was a woman and her 3 kids. And she was having an issue with her card. I think because she was from a foreign country, her card wouldn't, pick up on the scanner, getting snacks on the plane. And I overheard it. And I just walked by and instantly I saw my mom in her. I saw my mom on a plane with me and our card didn't work, whether it was insufficient funds or anything like that. And I went up to this flight attendant and I said, hey, can I buy whatever they want on, right? It's $10, it's a snack box, right? $10, $15. And her eyes started to water. This is the flight attendant. She went back there, told the person in the back the story, came back and said, hey, don't worry about it. It's on us. But that was extremely nice. I don't say this to toot my own horn. I say this to toot the horn of my mom, who taught me in that moment of, it's not about where you're sitting on a plane. It doesn't matter your job. It doesn't matter. The way that you're able to affect other human beings is the most important currency. And in that moment, again, it wasn't the fruit, it was the root, about people. It's about people. Now, she might not know who gave that to her, but I guarantee you in a moment's notice, she did it for somebody else in that day or in that week because it was done for her. And so again, caring about people is undefeated. People are the common denominator in sports, in teams, in organizations, in homes. It's about the people.
To that point, so often people are like, oh, you played sports. It doesn't apply here. My background is in agriculture. We've talked about, that. It's something that to that point of staying humble and realizing, yes, I could have, but no, I choose to do it myself. There's something so gratifying to me of doing things with my hands that remind me of my abilities, right? And not getting beyond that, not thinking too much of myself. But it also comes to this, that it doesn't matter where we're at in the world. It doesn't matter what industry. It doesn't matter what profession you have. There are people there. And I think the greatest opportunity as parents, as adults, we talked a little bit about mentorship earlier, is to give people the proper expectation in training of what their professional world should look like. And I think that is the great crossroads we're at. And I'm seeing firsthand, and I'm committed to. And we've talked about, your coaches and previous coaches. And I look at that, and you've had great examples. And you probably had some examples that weren't so special. But yet, the commitment to what you're doing now is saying that, wherever those people are in the world, I'm committed to helping them see that example of be the kind person. It's always about people. And if nothing more, the greatest impact you will ever have. And I saw this, and I love and appreciate this. And to your exact point earlier, getting to the root of connection and generational impact and purpose. That's what you're about. I love that. I appreciate that. I think that's why we've become good friends, is because that's where we're aligned in understanding it's about people, it's about connection. And when we embrace adversity and dig down into our greatness, man, we can help other people through their, connecting with them to see their impact and their purpose.
Yeah, that's spot on. One of the things is that I wrote this book because we're one of two people. We're either the mentor or the mentee. If you're a mentor, always have a story ready for the people that you're being called to lead. Always have an encouraging word. And then if you're the mentee, have the humility to ask. Ask the question, hey, how? Or what would you do? When we can ask those questions, we'll find the answers. And then when we become the proof, because somebody else is not going to have the example, then we're going to have a specific story, a personal story, one that we went through when we were in their same shoes. So again, we're either on one side of the table or the next, but remember, you're always going to go to the next side of the table so that you can look back and help somebody else.
Thomas, thank you so much, man. It's been great catching up. Great having you share about your book. I thoroughly enjoyed it after I was about, I don't know, 7, 8 chapters through. And I then ordered 2 more copies to give my sons.
You're
It was
awesome.
something I realized, man, they need to read this, and
Yeah.
excited for them to read it. So,
Man, super
thanks, man.
pumped. Tyler, thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for catching up. And always, I appreciate your energy as well as the impact that you have in this world.
Thanks, Thomas. As I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the points that I want to bring up, and I look down at my notes, there's something that didn't get recorded. It didn't even make my notes. But I want to share, this is the value of a mentor. I shared in the conversation that Thomas asked me before we started recording about living on property. I live on property. I have 10 acres. We have cows. And he asked about that experience. He and his family are looking at being in that position. And then afterwards, we continued the conversation about my son. I shared with him the dynamics, what was going on. And he is a great friend, just sat and listened. He offered some piece of advice, but he said this: Tyler, I'm grateful to be walking through this with you. Not only the example that you're going through, but we can have these conversations and go through this together. But that I then will be greater prepared when I'm leading my 3 children. See, as I reflect on that, Thomas doesn't have social media. He's one of those that left its halls of challenge back in 2019. That's something that's a piece and part of him. He talks about that when his conversation with John Gordon. But I'm thankful for this, that the times that we do get to interact, man, it means so much more. Because I know it's not just the trivial bits and pieces every day. That's not to take away from social media. You might be listening because of social media. That's great. There's a great avenue for it. But I want to caution this to you. Mentors are people that sit and listen to what you're going through. They're not necessarily people that comment on your stories or your posts. They're willing to just say, hey, tell me more about that. Tell me about what you're going through. Share with me. I can learn, or we can learn together. See, as I think about the different points and the 4 different elements that Thomas shared, whether it be pushing or preventing, whether it be example or proof, it's seek the quitting moments, or what I would say as well, it's those moments of crossroad moments. And then lastly, run towards the roar. This is what I know, and this is what I encourage you in life. When you find people that will run with you, you'll run for longer and you'll run faster. Who are those people around you that are willing to run towards the roar? I know it can be so impactful. My hope is that you're building a community that's listening, actively engaging with you in these conversations. That's what we do with the Impact-Driven Leader community, the roundtable, is we have conversations where we're running to the roar together, getting better as the challenges I shared that are so in our face today. Not in our face in a bad way, but our opportunity to be at those crossroads. Thanks again for being here. I hope you got tremendous value out of this. I hope you'll grab Thomas's book. It's a fun, quick, short read. As I mentioned, I bought the book after reading it for my 2 sons. Hopefully my 3 kids end up reading it because I know they're going to get value from it. Thanks for being here. Till next time, have a good one.